This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is a collaboration with filmmaker Harry Waldman and his new film Enter the Room. You can follow Harry on all the social medias, you can check out his Vimeo, or head over to Edgewater Film Production to go and see the film itself. Now enjoy the episode. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob. This week is a solo show again, guys, so you know when I have a solo show, I have to have a guest. And you might have noticed recently I've been getting a lot more people from the industry on, which is very exciting for me. If you've been paying attention to Instagram, you would have seen a few more tailored reviews. And I'm very lucky today to have a Chicago-based filmmaker on the show. He directed an incredible short film, which is still going around the festival circuit as it is. You may have seen my review a few weeks back for a film called Enter the Room. Today we have the director of that short. I'm very excited to meet him and have a bit of a chat about his career and his journey here, and of course him as a filmmaker as well. So let's not beat around the bush. Let's welcome him on. Please welcome to the show. It's Harry Waldman. Harry, how are you, mate?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting about the film and, just my story and other things in general.
Excellent, man. That's very exciting to have you on. I think you were either the first or second person this year to reach out and say, "Hey, you don't know me, but I've got a film. Do you want to check it out?" And I was so excited. It took me, I think, like 2-3 weeks to get to it. I was like, I just came back from overseas. I've been in the UK for the last 6 months. Then in January, I just arrived back home, and that's when everyone decided they wanted to talk to me. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I got to start managing this and get a calendar and stuff." Um, but I adored your short, man. We'll dive into it in a little bit. But I remember, like, after watching, I could see all these different influences. And I was like, am I nerding out too much? Am I like picking up stuff that's not being put down? But then I think I referenced in particular Gaspar Noé, and you're like, no, like that's someone I like. Um, Now you're based in Chicago, is that right?
Yeah, no, so I was born in Queens, New York,
Cool.
moved when I was very young. So I have some memories, but not too many vivid ones. Then I moved to New Jersey. So I was still pretty close, was going into Manhattan, the city a lot growing up. Went to college in upstate New York. And then after college, I worked in the city for a bit, but then I moved out to the Midwest in Chicago. And yeah, I love it out here. The weather is a bit rough. The winters are long, but aside from that, it's great. And it's finally starting to get warm out here, so everything's good on my end.
Everything I know about Chicago comes from movies, of course. So I think of, obviously all the John Hughes stuff, which is just rife with snow. So that and like Blues Brothers and now The Bear. And that's about the extent of my knowledge of Chicago. But at least, oh, actually, and then The Dark Knight, I suppose. Gotham City was Chicago, wasn't it? So it's getting its representation on screen. Um, you mentioned you studied in New York. Were you studying film, or is film kind of a late in life jump? Like how did that all come about?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Oh, fun fact before I'll dive into kind of the whole filmmaking story. So I, where I work is super close to the restaurant that they run in the Bear. I
Mm,
haven't seen the Bear yet. But yeah, Mr. Beef, really awesome place. Like it gets pretty crowded. It's pretty popular these days. I
yeah.
actually had been going there before the show happened. So
Yeah.
awesome place. Just had to throw that out there. But anyway, yeah. So to give a little background on my story, it's a bit of a long one. So
That's what we're here to do, man. Like the beauty of the podcast is you don't have a 10 minute oh, we're gonna ads in 10 minutes. You can take as long as you want. It's all good.
sounds good. Yeah. So rewinding all the way to when I was really young,
Mm,
because filmmaking, being a filmmaker was not something I realized I wanted to do till a little later in my life, but movies have always been a part of my life.
mm.
So some of the very oldest memories I have, one of my favorite memories, I was probably only about 4 years old, was watching Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
Love the original Indiana Jones trilogy, especially love the first one. And I was so obsessed, particularly with that opening scene, especially when Harrison Ford's being chased by the big boulder.
Of
That
course.
Yeah, when I was little, I mentioned now I live out in Chicago, but back when I was in New York City, I have family out here. My mom's sisters all live out in this area. So when we would come visit, I they had this kind of tall staircase, and they had some like bouncy balls, and I would take some of the balls and pretend I was Indiana Jones and run down them and have the balls come down after me. So a lot of fond memories messing around doing that. But yeah, so some of the other films, like many other younger kids, I started with a lot of the blockbusters. I love the original Star Wars trilogy,
Mm.
especially A New Hope. I was a little too young to be watching these, but I got real into the first two Terminator films, Alien.
I saw
So
your Alien poster. I was admiring it before.
oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I was super into those. I got real into Lord of the Rings when that first came
Yes.
out, of course. Um, but yeah, so whereas a lot of my favorite films still are blockbusters, but once I got into high school and especially college, I started to branch out. I realized
Yep.
how much I love just film as a medium, and I kind of wanted to experience everything. So actually, though, when I was in middle school, well, I mentioned all these films I absolutely loved, and some of those films I mentioned are still some of my favorites. The first film, which did have an influence on my short film Enter the Room, this was the first film I ever became absolutely obsessed with, was a film called Memento by Christopher Nolan. And
Yes, yes, and I can now that you say that, I just rewatched Memento less than I would say in the last kind of 4 months or so, and now that you say that, I see that in your flick. What a wonderful film. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, but yes. Yes,
oh no,
okay.
no, look, no, it's totally fine. Yeah, so basically, what happened? It wasn't my idea to watch the film because, as I'd mentioned, I was like 13 years old, and
Mm,
I was still very fixated on the big budget spectacles. And I was at a friend's house, and his parents were watching this movie, and they're like, "Oh, come down, guys! Like, you should watch this." And it had already started, and nowadays I don't want to go in part way through a film, but I was like, all right, whatever, I'll
yeah.
check it out. So already obviously a pretty confusing film, especially the first time. I jumped in and I'm initially, kind of thinking, well, I don't really know what's going on, but this is incredibly compelling. It's incredibly interesting. And when the film had ended, when it came to the final act, I was pretty confused, but in a good way. I've
Mm,
definitely had films or TV shows I've watched where it was a little too much for me. But whereas with this, I thought, okay, well, once I can piece this puzzle together, I think this is going to be something truly special. So I don't end up watching the film again for a couple of years. I kind of just forgot about it.
mm,
But then when I'm in ninth grade, back when Blockbuster still existed,
yeah.
I'm in a Blockbuster and I see it. I see Memento and I'm thinking, oh yeah, like I completely forgot about that film. I definitely need to watch that again because I was a bit confused with the final act. So I sit down, I watch it again, absolutely love it. I think I caught it at that time, but I'm like, you know what? Let's give it one more watch. I give it one more watch, like it even more the third time, and then do a little bit of research online just to confirm that I got everything correct. And yeah, just that whole twist, the way Nolan pulls the rug from underneath you, just absolutely blew me away. It's still arguably my favorite twist in any show or film ever. And I became so obsessed with the film that I had watched it a few nights in a row, but I believe I had it for like a week. That was how
Mm,
long I could rent at the Blockbuster. So I watched it a few more times. I think I watched it. It was somewhere between 5 and 7 times total.
wow.
And what was crazy about the film was that even after I fully understood the twist after a few watches, there were just all these little Easter eggs and subtleties that Nolan lays in there that it was like every time I watched it, I caught something new. So yeah, I mean, that was really the first film. I mentioned some of the earlier films, which are still some of my favorites. I don't think I love Lord of the Rings so much. I love the original Star Wars trilogy. I don't think I could watch one of those films like 7 days in a row. I think that would get a little tedious and redundant for me. Um, whereas Memento now, I wouldn't watch it 7 days in a row, but it was crazy to me how much fun it was just trying to unlock everything that he dropped in that film. So anyway, yeah. So fast forward a couple of years, and I'm a little further in high school, and I went in completely blind to this film. I remember there were a few films. I was out in the Chicago area before I lived out here, and we were visiting my mom's sisters, and they were going to the mall for the day, and I just figure out, well, I'll just go see a movie,
Mm,
and I see this new Batman film coming out, Batman Begins,
mm.
and so I grew up with, well, they're a lot of fun, and I still enjoyed them. I grew up on Well, I did grow up on the Tim Burton Batman. I think that's a really solid film. I really enjoyed that one. But the one my age range was more people my age were watching. It was the Val Kilmer Batman film, and then Batman and Robin. Batman Forever and Batman.
I've literally just been rewatching them this last week. I was like, you know what? I haven't pulled these out in a minute, and it's fascinating. I'm about to start Batman and Robin, which was my first Batman, so I have a very soft spot for that film. But it is interesting watching that tonal shift. Like the Tim Burton ones, yeah, they're a little bit aged, they're a little bit campy, but they still kind of really hold true to what we know Batman to be. And I chucked on Forever, and there's some really wonderful dark moments, but it's a whole different movie. Like it's very, very different. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So again, like I enjoyed watching them as a kid. They're fun, but they're obviously tonally, as you mentioned, they couldn't be more different from Batman Begins. So
Mm.
again, I went in blind. I didn't watch any trailers, and I didn't realize at the time that this was the same director who made Memento. So
Yeah.
I really had no expectations, and it must have taken 2 minutes for me to be like, "Oh, this is going to be serious. This is going to be good." I was absolutely floored by the film. It's still one of my favorites. I do think, and understandably, it got a bit overshadowed by The Dark Knight, which is also one of my favorite films. But I do really think, as a standalone film, Batman Begins really works on so many levels. So
I
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
yeah, and when the credits roll, I see Christopher Nolan, and I kind of stop for a minute and think, wait a minute,
Mm.
where have I seen that name? I look him up. I see, oh my God, this is the guy that directed that crazy film Memento. And the light bulb pops on in my head where I'm thinking, oh, like the film, that's the film director. Okay, that's that's probably an important position, at
Yeah.
least on most. So he was the first director I exclusively followed. And as I
Nice.
followed over the years, there have been a handful of films, particularly from in the 2000s. I mean, I still like his recent work, but I would say from Memento through Inception was when I was just absolutely obsessed with all of his films.
Mm.
But anyway, rewinding a bit. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of me becoming obsessed with films. Once I hit middle of high school, especially in college, I kind of just started going through everything. I started
Mm.
going through a lot of classic Hollywood films, 60s and 70s films. I started watching more foreign films and just finding, that yeah, I didn't only need the blockbuster, like the blockbuster, the classic American blockbuster. There are just so many different types of films that I was enjoying equally. And it just opened this crazy Pandora's box where it did feel like, and to this day, I'm always behind on movies. I'm trying to get caught up. I usually try to watch at least a movie a day, but there's so many. But anyway,
Yeah. I just want to jump back to that.
oh yeah,
The way you're talking about like especially in college, you talk about that. It's such a period of discovery. Like it sounds very similar to my time as well. Like if you're a film fan, like if you're obsessed with movies the way that I am and the way it sounds like you are as well, it's such a wonderful, exciting time because you don't have the commitments of adult life. You're like, I can go to the video store. Like, it sounds like you're a video store kid, just like me. I worked at the Australian equivalent of Blockbuster for a couple of years, and just knowing you could take 7 movies home and just like watch a movie 7 times in a week. I can't think of too many I did watch 7 times in a week. I think maybe School of Rock holds the record for film I watched the most in a week, which I think
uh,
was double digits. But that period of discovery, like I remember I went to school to study writing, and after a while I got sick of the classes. I was 19, arrogant. I was like, I know better than these people. So instead of going to class, I would go to the library and just pump movies into my laptop and just catch up on movies instead. And it sounds like you had a similar experience where you're just devouring everything. So I just want to take a pause and just to celebrate that, because I think it's a moment we don't think about a lot. Like we talk to people about their journey to becoming a filmmaker or getting involved in the arts some way, but we kind of almost overshine that. It's like, no, no, like we put in the hours. We just sat there and watched movies nonstop, and that's how we kind of discovered what we wanted to do and be. But sorry, it was just so relatable and lovely to hear you talk about that period of discovery. I will let you continue. Sorry, I just wanted to shine a light on that bit.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I'm not. I mean, everyone's different. I've definitely met some filmmakers where they weren't necessarily watching a billion movies.
Mm.
They just got into filmmaking for whatever reason. But I'm definitely somebody who ever before I ever picked up a camera, I'd watched many films. But yeah, so anyway, going switching gears slightly. So I've mentioned how I was obsessed with watching movies, how It was a big part of my life from when I was very young. When it came to the actual filmmaking side of things,
Mm.
I suppose I was more like my grandpa, who awesome guy. He the most generous person I ever met. He helped pay for my college. He came
Wow.
from a super poor family and just very self-made. Um, and it wasn't that he ever put too much pressure on me. It's just that I really respected him, and I was very practical, where I kind of thought, oh yeah, like you're supposed to have a 9 to 5 desk job and you're probably going to hate it, but it's just life. And I got very depressed thinking about it. So I
Yeah.
tried not to focus on it too much. I really focused on my hobbies, after school. Um, so anyway, so he kind of nudged me to go into accounting, which I would later learn is one of my least favorite subjects of all time. Um,
Yep.
the, the good
It's
news is
the
I
it's
didn't.
the antithesis of filmmaking. Like,
Yeah.
filmmaking is fun and bright and creative, and accounting is just literally numbers. Oh, like, uh, did you do any accounting, or like you were just like, nope, not for me, and you kind of
No,
moved away
no.
quickly?
So what happened was I took one accounting class in high school, and not only was it very boring in my opinion, it was harder than I thought it was going to be. I,
Mm,
I really have to have a certain type of mind to even be able to do it. So I I found my happy medium. I still didn't realize that filmmaking was what I wanted to do, and I didn't put two and two together that, yeah, I should go into video production. So I studied business. I concentrated on marketing, which I would describe as, of the main business subjects, I find it to be the least boring.
mm,
It's not something I'm passionate about, but it at least piqued my interest. I took some marketing classes in college where I was at least paying attention, which was not the case with so many of my classes growing up. Whereas, yeah, when I would take accounting or finance classes, it got to the point at the end of college where I would just bring my laptop in and be playing games or like messing around on the internet, like not even, and then I would just cram and study and, try to get a B- on my test or whatever. Um, but yeah, anyway, so what was really eye opening for me, though, was my second semester of my junior year of college. And I should have realized this earlier, because when I was actually in grade school, I had a couple classes. It was a history class, and I don't even remember the name of the other class, where we did these little kind of fun but silly video projects. And I
mm,
loved doing both of them. One was supposed to be this commercial for this before VR was a big thing, for this like virtual reality system. And another was this it was supposed to be this Jerry Springer spoof of
mm.
it was Alexander the Great versus Darius. These were
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. So these were by far my two favorite projects. I mean, these were, when I look back on all my projects in school, like 95% of them I hated. Maybe like 4% of them were like bearable, and these were the two where it was like, I mean, I remember doing, especially the Alexander the Great one. I remembered it was like, I think we were doing it on a Friday after school, it's Thursday or Friday after school, and one of the other friends who wasn't into it as much, we were shooting for a couple hours, and I was having so much fun doing it. We kept breaking character and laughing. Um, and he was kind of like, "Oh, guys, I got to get out of here. I want to go out." And I'm thinking, like, I'm having more fun doing this than if I was out with.
Yeah.
So, so I should have realized it back then, but as I'd mentioned, I just wasn't. I didn't think it was realistic to make a living doing something like that. Um, so, but fast forward to near the end of college, and this was when I really realized that business kind of wasn't for me. Was that I took this personal essay class, and I actually took it as a filler. I was hoping it was going to be an easy course, like an easy
Mm,
A. I talked to a few friends, and they took it and they said, "Oh no, like this class is hard. Like you're going to struggle to get a B plus. This professor's they're like, he's good, but he's a stickler." And I'm
mm,
thinking, "Oh, like great." So, and it's too late. It's too late to drop out. It's the class is about to begin. So I'm a little intimidated, but for what he basically had us do was we'd read a lot of excerpts and like analyze them in class, and that ended up being a lot of fun. But
mm.
throughout the course, we had to write three different personal stories. It was very relaxed, where it was like it didn't have to be something super specific, but just something that stood out in your life. And the very first story I wrote, I had so much fun doing it. It was probably the most fun I ever had working on a project, next to maybe the two video projects I did to that date. and he ended up loving it, and he gave it an A minus, and he was, I mean, he just was, he was super into it, and it was just one of it was very cathartic for me, and it was
Mm,
just so much fun, and that was, and I realized going into that class I was actually excited, whereas my other
yeah.
classes I'd kind of dread going. So anyway, so that's when I started to get this feeling maybe business isn't right for me. Fast forward about a year, I have about a semester left in college, and I end up going out to a bar with some friends that night, and I have this dream, and it's still, I have, like many other people, I have lots of crazy, ridiculous dreams. I usually forget about them after, a couple hours or a couple days. This is not nearly one of my craziest dreams. It's the one I always remember though. Was It was just this dream that I was this student at this prestigious film school, and I was
Mm,
going to going to cinematography 101, editing 101, going to all these classes, getting ready to like make a film with some fellow students and friends. And the dream, there wasn't anything super specific that happened in it, but it just felt incredibly real. And
mm,
it felt so real that when I got up out of my bed, I didn't realize I was had been dreaming before. So I
mm,
grabbed my backpack and my jacket, and I'm getting ready to run over to my film class, and I suddenly realize that it's Saturday. It's like noon or 11:30. I just been out at a bar with friends. I'm not a film student, studying business marketing. I guess I'm just gonna have a job I hate for the rest of my life,
mm.
and that's it. So I sort of stopped dead in my tracks. I dropped my backpack. I dropped my jacket. I sit on my bed, and that might have been the most deflating moment of my entire life. So I sit and I stare at the wall for, I don't know, must have been at least 10 minutes, between 10 and 20 minutes, and that's when the light bulb pops on in my head, and I realize, like, well, it sucks that, as I'm getting ready to graduate school, I didn't study film, especially because Ithaca's pretty known for their film school. But
Yeah.
I realized, like, I was still only 21 at the time. This is far from too late.
Mhm.
So I come up with this plan. I'll use this business degree. I'll I'll start doing something in finance, which I did. I worked in insurance for 5 years. That was rough. Not doing that anymore.
I have
Uh,
worked in insurance. It is rough. It's
yeah,
oh, you got to have a certain mindset. I made it about 7 months. You did 5 years. My hat is off to you. That's impressive.
yeah. I My sanity kept for about 2.5, and
Yeah.
the last 2.5, I joked with people. It almost felt like, if you're familiar with Seinfeld,
Mm,
not this extreme, but when George is deliberately trying to get fired from the
yep.
Yankees. That's that's what I think subconsciously I was. I wasn't actively trying to, but I was taking advantage of certain situations and getting called on it, rightfully so. And then
Mm,
anyway, so I ended up leaving out after about 5 years. But while I was doing that, this is what the key was that right after school, I immediately started doing film research. I started with
nice.
just an endless amount of YouTube videos. I rented some books from the library. And then I started just trying to network.
Mm,
And one of the first networking events I went to out in Chicago, I met this guy Eugene, who's a semi well known indie filmmaker, and he brought me as a production assistant onto one of his films, and that was the first professional film set that I got to be on, and it was a decent sized one. There were probably about 50 people on the film. Usually each day there were like 20 to 30. Um, and yeah, it was just really cool getting to sort of see the whole process. It was definitely eye opening for me. And with all that being said, though, it was great being on set. But I also, and I get it, you got to work your way up. I also wanted to do more, and
yeah.
I was doing a lot of, picking up supplies and food for people, which is understandable. But the key was, while I was doing that, I met this guy Lance, who I'm
Okay.
still close with. He was a producer on the film, and we really hit it off. So after that film, I started working on his film sets, and his were
Nice.
a little smaller, but his were these very efficient, micro budget, kind of just take one afternoon, get a couple actors, very dialogue heavy, usually just one location. So I got comfortable with that. First being a PA, then I did some assistant lighting, assistant camera work. Anyway, so all while I was doing that, I just doing research. I remembered a quote from, I think it was uh, James Cameron and Steven Spielberg, that yeah, it's great to go to class, it's great to learn, but at the end of the day, like, just do it. Just buy a cheap camera and shoot. So I did
all
that. I went over to Best Buy.
all the best filmmakers didn't go to school, did they? Like Nolan, prime example. Like you mentioned him a couple of times, didn't go to school. Tarantino didn't go to school. Um, and it sounds like from your story, and we'll get there. It sounds like you didn't go to school for film either. Like you just picked up a camera and went.
It's I would say between well-known filmmakers I've looked up and filmmakers I've met, it is max 50%. And I
Yeah.
think it's probably lower. I think it might be closer to like 35 to 40. Yeah, it is interesting how many people end up in the industry who didn't go to film school, and then also how many people go to film school and then realize it's not for them and end up doing something else.
Mm.
Um,
Wow, I didn't even think about that statistic. You always think that like if they don't get into film, it's almost like it wasn't their choice. I feel like that's kind of the Hollywood story. It's like either make or you don't. But I didn't even consider that maybe people change their mind. Like,
yeah. Um, but yeah, so I bought a cheap camera from Best Buy. I made my first film, more super fun, more amateur film. This film called 515, which actually was shot in this apartment, which
oh
it looked
wow,
a bit different back in the day. But yeah, it was tough. I made the whole thing on my own. It was really tough. One, I can't act, so that was I almost ended up turning it into a comedic performance, which people appreciated because I realized I'm not a serious dramatic actor. I don't have any real acting experience. But then also setting up the camera and everything else, and dealing with continuity because I was only shooting this. I was working Monday through Friday, so I was usually only shooting this, and the entire film takes place during the day. So Saturday and Sunday morning, afternoon, and I kept running into continuity issues because the whole film takes place in one day.
mm.
So I had to be really careful about not moving stuff around in my apartment. So I had to reshoot a lot. My hair was getting too long, so I'd have to get it cut the same length. Anyway, so I ended up making that film, and I what really surprised me is how much I loved editing, and that's what I do now for a living. Editing was something I just envisioning it. I just thought I would hate it, and it would be. I mean, it is tedious, but I did not realize how much fun and how satisfying it would be. And when I
it.
really felt, oh,
Sorry,
sorry,
no, I was gonna say that makes so much sense because, and we will get to your short, but I rewatched it this morning, so I've watched it about half a dozen times, and I think the thing that I noticed the most every time I watch it is the editing. And not that I notice it in like, oh, it's so obvious. It's just the style of editing you've chosen. And it's not just the visuals. Like obviously there's a sequence towards the end which is very fast paced and uses a lot of color, but even the audio editing, like um we'll get there. We'll get there. But there's a moment very
yeah,
early in the short where the audio is edited in such an incredible way, and I was like, "This is wow." Whoever like I did this is incredible. That's really cool and fun, and you can tell that you're having a good time doing it. So that makes so much sense. Yeah.
I appreciate that because yeah, editing is definitely something that doesn't always get recognized. And before I continue my very long story of how I got into filmmaking, I one thing I've noticed just going to festivals and everything, I people tend to notice, and I understand it. I understand the power of longer takes, wider shots. They can be so powerful. I thought stylistically for this film, it made more sense to have tighter, closer shots, very quick cuts. And while that sometimes isn't always recognized as positively, but it's something I was very deliberate about, and I put in a ton of effort, being
Mm,
trying to like every cut. That was where the film took so long to be completed was during the post production process. But
yeah.
um, but yeah.
Well, you can see it, and you can see the effort. Like, and it's both effortless, and also you can tell there's a lot of hard work behind it. Like, if you don't know film, if you don't pay attention to that stuff, you're just like, wow, like what sort of magic trick is this? But as someone who has dabbled with editing and definitely hated it in the past, like I can see the hard work, but you make it look so effortless. It's yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and there's a couple of moments we'll talk about when we get to it. But oh, it is a well cut short.
Thanks. I appreciate it. But yeah, so anyway, kind of just wrapping up the filmmaker story. So yeah, so I made that film and editing was when it really came together, particularly cutting it to music. So it ended up being I've learned later that the film's pretty long. I believe it's about 29 minutes. But I sent it to a few friends, and people seem to really enjoy it. It usually when I try something, it turns out a lot worse than I hoped, and I felt like this turned out probably even a little better than I
Oh,
hoped, which is really
nice.
awesome surprise. Yeah, it was especially earlier when I was earlier in the post process before I put in the music, before I color graded everything. It was a little tedious and redundant and kind of boring, so I was getting worried. But once I kind of put it all together, I started feeling much better about it. But yeah, so I ended up making that film, but then I'm a bit stuck. I write the script for this film, Enter the Room, which of course we'll get more into, um, which was actually loosely based on a rough relationship I had with a roommate in college. As we get into that, I can get more into that whole thing. But yeah, I wrote the script for that, and at the time, I didn't have the film school or the experience, the connection, so I just thought, well, I guess I could shoot it and play both the brothers and have them be twins. Excuse me, but I knew in the back of my mind I'm not a good actor. Like I'm not gonna for 515 it worked because it's just this kind of goofy, unserious. Tonally, it's dark, but it's more people describe it as funny, and my acting being bad almost enhances it a little just because of the tone. Whereas with Enter the Room, I'm thinking like I don't. I'm gonna have to really work to be able to
Mm.
make these performances believable. Um, so fortunately, what happened was I was on my friend Lance, one of his friends' shoots, and we were eating lunch, taking a break, and he asked me what I was working on, and I told him about the Enter the Room script. And I'd done this before where people would ask me and say, "Oh yeah, send it over. I'll take a look." And I'd send it over, and maybe they would take a look, maybe not. I wouldn't hear back. I didn't want to bother them. He was the first person where he emailed me back pretty quick, and he was really complimenting the script.
Nice.
And I suppose from his perspective, maybe he was thinking of a sort of pro bono deal where I'd helped him on some of his films. But he emails me and says, I'd love to produce and shoot this film. And this was probably the biggest stepping stone in my filmmaking career. I'm thinking this is the break I needed because it had
Mm.
been sitting on the shelf for months. Like I said, I didn't know how to bring people on board. So I immediately said yes, of course. Like that would be amazing. So it was so important to see him produce because while I'd always thought about writing and directing and editing, I mean, producer, it's definitely not as fun, but you need someone to do the dirty work.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he brought everyone on board. He brought our assistant director on board, Mo, who was great. He was really punctual. He did a really good job keeping everything on time. He posted the casting notices. We ended up Peter and Rich, the two actors. Those were the two strongest, so we ended up going with them. We scheduled a few rehearsals, and then we brought on a couple professional sound people, a couple gaffers, and yeah, then we scheduled out the shoot days. We'd scheduled four, but we were I suppose it helped because it was all shot, in this one smaller apartment, and there weren't any really crazy setups. It was just a lot of quicker, shorter close-ups. But we ended up finishing in about 2.5 days, even though we scheduled four, which was
Wow.
awesome.
2.5
Um,
days. I know it's a short, but wow, that is quick.
yeah, and
Especially knowing, like, there's a lot of it looks like there's a lot of setups in that, especially that final sequence. Like, that feels quick.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and they weren't long shoot days. They weren't, I've heard some people like, "Oh yeah, we did 14 hour." They were generally about 8 hour, and then the last
Nice.
shoot day, it might have been more like 5 or 6. But yeah, I think it really the assistant director really helped the actors. The three rehearsals because of those, they had barely any problems during the shoot. They were really good, and everybody just worked really. My gaffer was super quick and efficient, so I was really happy with how it turned out, and it was so important seeing Lance be a producer on that film because
Mm.
now I realized, okay, this is a lot of work, but I think I can do this. So I made two more short stints. In the backseat, this kind of silly dark comedy, and then Bay for Blood, which that film is a little closer to Enter the Room, where it's this dark psychological thriller with another character who's probably just as crazy as Brian, maybe even crazier. Um, so yeah, and I got a little more comfortable with each film, producing and directing them, and I ended up making my first feature film, The Corridor Crossing, which is still going to be in post for a while, but it is. I'm pretty happy with it. I've been
Awesome.
cutting it down a bit, but that is probably that was by far the hardest to make, but it is, I would say, my favorite of my personal projects. Of course, it's not finished. It still needs to be cleaned up a bit, but yeah, and that basically brings me to where I am now. And then in addition to that, I'd mentioned, working in insurance. I did end up moving over to video production full time,
Nice.
starting out as a freelance editor, doing a lot of post production, a lot of video ingest, and yeah, some editing too. So yeah, I'm definitely I'm feeling pretty good about where I am right now. Definitely better than when I was in. Even though when I was making the films, it was great, but when I was in the insurance office all day, it was a little rough. So
I was going to ask. I was going to ask like what's next, but you've done it. You've made your first feature, and you're doing it. You're in the industry full time. That's so awesome. That's very exciting. Congratulations. That's cool.
thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, what one? If you're asking what's next, I do have a couple other. I have another feature film. We'll see. Things are pretty. I am hoping to get it into production in September. The script needs to be cleaned up a lot. I'm
Hmm.
happy with the script, but it's like really bloated.
Yep.
I could probably cut 20 to 30% down.
That's the
So
editor talking. You know. You know.
yeah. So so yeah, and I'm starting to dabble in animation too. I'm
Oh,
actually a huge
awesome.
animated film junkie. My dad is a professional artist. He hasn't done so much animation, but we've started storyboarding. It's looking good. Wow, though it's hard work. It takes a lot of time. So my guess is the animated film will not be done for a while. But I hope to. The live action films have been awesome, but I actually in the long term I hope to kind of be 50-50. Make one live action film, make one animated, and kind of
Oh,
go
that's
back and forth.
cool. Oh, that's very cool. And so few people do that. Most people tend to stay in one lane. But it sounds like you're kind of got it, spinning a couple of different plates. And so you're still working on that first feature, and is the goal that you'll finish that before September, so you'll be there in time, or are you going to be working on both at the same time?
I'll be working on both. This feature,
That is indie
I
film.
yeah. If I were to try to finish this feature by September, I definitely would never sleep again till then and go crazy. So yeah, it's gonna be a little crazy. It's more I feel like the classic meme where it's like the guy with with his girlfriend and then he's looking back and it's I'm getting that itch. It's been a couple of years since I've made a film, and I know for my sanity, it's just even though it would probably be a more intelligent move to finish the corridor crossing first. I mean I'm doing well, but it's again that I a lot of filmmakers and creatives, you get that bug and it's like it's been itching for about a year, and I kind of remember telling myself like 3 or 4 months ago like if I can I better try to get this next one going. I'll definitely be in a better headspace, and then kind of while I have free time from that, I'll continue to edit the corridor crossing, and I'm hoping once I have this next film's called Incautious. Once I have that film shot, I will casually start editing that and then really focus on finishing the corridor crossing
Yeah.
completely. So
I think most creators can relate. I mentioned before I've dabbled with writing before. It wasn't uncommon for me to have a couple of projects on the burner at the same time. My buddy is an independent video game creator. He's got his own company, and he's often working on a couple of games at once. Just seems to be our disease as creators is we have to have a few stories moving at once. Um, I want to talk about Enter the Room, but before we do, you mentioned some really influential films on you early on. You mentioned Raiders, you mentioned Star Wars. Who gives that to you? Is it you mentioned your dad's a bit of an artist? Does it come from your dad? Who brings film to you before you even know what film is? Where does that start?
I think it's I think it's both sides of my family. My dad's family is definitely so. My mom's pretty into movies too, and she has pretty good taste, and we watch a lot of movies together.
Mm,
She comes from a more though that's my grandpa, who is an awesome guy, very like well
mm.
grounded. He more worked in business. They're more they all get along pretty well. They all have a pretty close relationship. I see them. I see my mom's sisters regularly. I actually just saw them for dinner last night. They
Oh,
live pretty
nice.
close to me. My dad's family is more like your. They're all good people, but it's more like your typical crazy artist family where all of them, all three of his siblings and him dabbled in art, and they've all been pretty successful, and they've all had their problems, and they all they're all still in contact, but one of them lives in Portugal now. They're all kind of spread out, and I don't see them as much.
Mm,
But they all have that creative gene. They're all incredibly talented at drawing, and I definitely think more of my creative gene comes from that side. And I've
yeah.
definitely, well, I think my mom has good taste, and I respect them. A lot of my favorite films and TV shows are just really wild, wacky, really out there.
Mm,
So, sort of a lot of my favorite films are multi-genre and might have a mix of science fiction, fantasy, horror, a little bit of pitch black comedy, um, which much more closely resembles my dad. My
yep.
mom tends to be more into standard dramas, even though she does like some of those films. So yeah, I would say it inherently comes from my dad's side of the family, and even my sister. She isn't in the film industry, but she really likes movies and TV shows, and her tastes are actually more similar to mine and my dad's than my mom's, which is
Mm.
interesting. She really likes horror. That she might be the biggest fan of horror films of the entire family, actually, which is
Oh
interesting.
wow.
Yeah.
Just touching on, I was thinking about this because you're talking about the importance of music and editing to music, and just your passion for editing itself. And now you've brought up the horror and kind of genre bending angle. Have you been to see Sinners yet? Have you seen that new Ryan Coogler film?
So I want to.
Okay.
I have a few. I have one of my friends saw it, and he was just raving about it. I heard nothing but incredible things. I've always really liked Ryan Coogler. I knew about him. Even before Creed and Black Panther, which I loved. It was actually my favorite film of his was Fruitvale Station.
Such a
I,
wonderful, like, heartbreaking. Oh my god, like it's so heartbreaking, but wonderful film. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, so he's been very well on my radar. I think he's one of the better filmmakers on planet Earth, and
Mm,
I have not heard of one between online. I'm in a lot of like Facebook film groups and stuff, and I have a lot of friends who like movies. I I have not witnessed anyone badmouth it, which is so rare for a film,
mm,
especially with the internet. So it is something I definitely want to see in the next few weeks. My schedule is a little crazy.
yeah.
One of my good friends who really likes movies, he texted me last weekend just kind of saying like, yeah, we got to check this out while it's in theaters. And
Yeah.
especially nowadays with movies not lasting in theaters as long, it's something I definitely am going to try to do in the next few weeks.
The only reason I bring it up is I literally just saw it last night. I came back and I got about 5 hours sleep, and I woke up for the interview because I didn't want to miss you, but I didn't want to miss Sinners either. And hearing what you're saying about your love of the genre or the multi-genre films and the editing, like it feels like it's right up your alley. Like, based on the for 40 minutes I've been speaking to you, the editing is so interesting. And there's a couple of moments where I always love it, when there's an action sequence and they kind of cut it to the beats of the music, and there's a little bit of stuff like that in there. So I think, like, I won't give anything away, but I think, like, based on what you're telling me, it'll be your kind of jam. I think it's a pretty fascinating flick. So
That's
yeah.
awesome, and yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for that for sure on the editing and the music because yeah, that's
Mm,
as I mentioned, that's one of the. I mean, with film, I try to focus on all aspects, but
hmm
that's when I get into post, particularly with music and editing, it's something I really hyper focus on for
hmm
sure.
Nice, excellent, very cool. Yeah, you're right. No one, I haven't heard a bad word about it either. Like, there are things like any film. Like, if you wanted to find something, there's definitely stuff you could pick apart. But I find that to be way less fun than enjoying movies, to be honest. So, um, all right. So,
Definitely.
Enter the Room. That's why we're here. We're going to talk about Enter the Room. So, I posted a review on it for people listening. If they haven't checked it out yet, or haven't had a chance yet, like, yeah, we'll tell people at the end how to find it. Story of two brothers. I've written it down because even though I've watched it half a dozen times, I'm so bad with names. So you got Brian, who's the brother who lives in the apartment, and then his brother Jeremy has got a film job. He's coming to visit him. Brian's quite neurotic. I kind of likened it to the Odd Couple in many ways. So there's two very different personalities, and Brian likes things a very certain way. Jeremy is more of, I guess, kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Is just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do my own thing, and then the film really focuses on their relationship, and those two actors are fantastic. The performances, like, they bounce off each other so well. And when you sent it to me, you were like, "This is a psychological thriller." For the first 7 to 10 minutes, I'd forgotten it was that because it's just so fun. Um, where does the idea come from? You mentioned a roommate. Where does the idea of the film come from?
Yeah. So a fun fact, and I think where people have resonated with this film was that a lot of not at the end, of course. Things get very crazy at the end, but for the
Mm,
first half or so of the film, first two thirds even before kind of the big reveal later in the film, a lot of the interactions were actually pretty heavily based on a relationship I had with a roommate in the beginning of college.
mm,
It was, I believe he had been an only child and he hadn't been used to living with anyone else. I spent a number of years of my life sharing a room with my sister, so I suppose I got more used to it.
mm.
Um, but yeah, he was definitely a bit uptight, a bit neurotic to say the least. But yeah, about 80 to 90% of the things that Brian accuses Jeremy of in that film were actual things he said to me and accused me of. And fun fact about the film, the final script ended up being about 12 to 13 pages. It was initially closer to 30, so
Oh
there were a
wow.
lot of other things that happened between us that just didn't quite make the cut. We kind of just cut it down and kept the most compelling stuff. So yeah, it really started. It what's interesting is and I guess what I've heard with a lot of comedy, it started from a place of anger. I felt
Mm,
like I needed to get this story off my chest, and what was interesting was that I knew this film was going to be dark and intense. I did not know that some people were going to find it to be funny. Generally, people who have a darker sense of humor, which I love, because now looking back, I totally see it, and I
mm,
realized writing enough scripts, I generally have at least one character in all my films. It's usually a male character who is just the angriest person, and he
mm,
is just kind of projecting all of his insecurities and frustrations on everyone around him. And I've come to learn, like, oh yeah, I can see how some people are going to find this to be funny, because that was my first real script. Because my previous film 515 has almost no dialogue,
okay.
so I didn't at that time I didn't realize. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting seeing how the reaction that it gets. It definitely triggers some people seeing Brian, being very uptight and neurotic. But it is interesting, particularly at some of the horror festivals, some of the genre festivals, where the crowd would be laughing a lot for the first
Mm.
half of the film. So I
It's
take pleasure
really
surprised.
funny. It makes me laugh a lot, and I can watch it, and I've known people like Brian, and then there are moments where I'm like, oh, I see a little bit of myself in Brian, so I find it makes it easy to laugh myself. But there's a line he talks about, like the discs in his DVDs. I'm like, oh, that's me. I'm like, that's been me for 20 years. But yeah, I was surprised going in. I had no idea how fun it was going to be. It's interesting to hear you say that you like it wasn't meant to be a comedy, but it does. Like I think it's such an honest, earnest story, and those characters are so real, particularly Brian, that you can't help but like if you don't laugh, you're gonna maybe feel a bit bad about yourself because like, oh, I see too much of myself in this character. But it's wickedly funny. Like I find myself in hysterics. Like even this morning, I watched it again, and I was still laughing at the same jokes. Which normally, if you watch a comedy, an intended comedy kind of 4 or 5 times after a while the jokes get a bit predictable and it kind of falls away and it becomes like Clerks is one of my favorite films of all time. I love Clerks changed my life. I don't watch it as a comedy anymore. I watch it, I'm like, this is just a day in the life and I relate to this. Enter the Room I've watched 5 or 6 times in the last couple of weeks, and still when he talks about the DVDs, the whole monologue about the L train like has me in tears. It's so funny. And maybe because it wasn't intended to be, it just works better because I'm like, I've met that person, and at times I've been that person. So yeah, I think it's hilarious. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And actually, I didn't, because I mentioned the character being based on my roommate, but I did put pieces of myself in Brian too.
Okay.
It's more, I'm a bit of a clean freak. I can be a bit, I have some OCD issues. The difference, of course, is that when I've had roommates, I would keep it in because I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna. Whereas this guy couldn't with me. But no, yeah, and I've definitely talked to some people. You're not the first one where they said on the one hand Brian really triggered me, but on the other hand, like I've had some moments where a roommate was being a slob, and I maybe not as obnoxiously as Brian, but like maybe I wanted to say something like they should clean their act up. So
Mm. I may or may not have had a moment like that yesterday. Actually, I'm married. I've got a young daughter, and when you have children, you have to get used to the fact that your house is going to get messy pretty much all the time. And I wasn't that guy for the longest time. I wasn't a neat freak. And then when I moved to my wife, she maybe let me know that I wasn't as neat as I thought I was. So, in a very polite, we're still together, obviously. And yesterday I was just looking at the house and they were going shopping. I'm like, that's it. I'm tearing this goddamn place apart. I am fixing this house. And like watching it this morning, I was like, oh, I brined it. Like that's that's what's happened here. I do want to also throw credit to Rich who plays Jeremy because I've been talking about Brian and obviously I think Brian is the character that we most focus on, and rightfully so because he is kind of the main character and he does have all these quirks. But it takes a very talented actor to be the straight man, to kind of play opposite something like that, and to let a character like that or an actor like that chew the scenery. And I mean that in the most respectful way. Like he is going nuts, he's doing all sorts of stuff, but to be the person to bounce off and to be more restrained. So Rich, I think, is fantastic as well, and plays a really wonderful straight man, a very kind of every man to the insanity that is Brian. I think he does a great job as well.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up because generally, and it's understandable. I like to describe. So normally, I feel like with my shorts, with the features, there's more time. With the
Hmm.
shorts, I feel like when I'm making a 15 or an 18-minute film, I probably have enough time to have one what I call the money role. That's usually the crazed role, the most complex role. And I knew writing the script that Brian is the one who's going to shine, even if
Hmm.
a lot of the audience, is triggered by him, and some people even dislike him. And Peter was a perfect fit.
Hmm.
I mean, definitely a nicer guy in real life than the character he played, but he had that neurotic personality, and he had you know, that sort of fidgetiness, and like he spoke very fast, and he's lived all over the world, so he has a really interesting accent, and
Does
which
his
really
voice is
worked.
really interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, so he was just the perfect fit. But I'm glad you brought up Rich because just between festivals and like hearing critique, 80 to 90% of the time, Brian is the character. Peter's the one who gets noticed, and
Yeah.
I understand that, but I do think that Rich. So yeah, I mentioned this was my first professional film. While Peter came in and crushed in his audition, Rich was the first one who like really blew me away. Like I
Mm.
remember when Peter was done reading, think we all thought, okay, this guy's good. He's the right fit. But Rich did this. He did this all out, super dramatic monologue, and we'd had a couple other actors who looked really good. And I remembered he said something, and just trying to be respectful, like, well, whatever happens, guys, best luck with the project. And I wasn't gonna blurt it out there, but I'm thinking like that you're gonna get cast really soon. Like that was as awesome as like any audition I've seen. He's an incredibly gifted actor. It
Mm.
really, I definitely got a bit talent struck watching him. Um, he just, yeah, how real he seems, how his emotional range and intensity, how real he always seemed, and yeah, the fact that he, like you said, the straight man role, it's not the glamorous role, but then for someone as talented as Rich, that's some people will notice how good he is, even
Mm.
though the character Brian is kind of the one that you're hyper focused on throughout the film.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad I brought it up because yeah, it is one of those things that I could see it. Like I'm watching, I'm like, oh, this guy playing Brian is going to get all the attention. But yeah, you need like if it was him in a room by himself, it would be a very different situation. Like you do need someone to bounce off and someone to be such a like. It seems like Rich, just based on the performance alone, seems like such a very giving scene partner. Where it's just like, look, you do all the craziness. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to do my thing. Um, yeah, sorry, I lost train of thought for a second, but yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. So I'm glad that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's and yeah, and he even, in addition, I agree with everything you're saying. And I actually, he has quite the versatility too. I saw a couple of his short films where he played a really kind of mean, nasty character and could steal
Oh
the show
wow.
too. But I think he recognized the role, and
Mm,
that, Jeremy, a super important role, but it more is kind of Brian's show, and he did a really good job knowing
mm,
when to step back. But then near the end, when Jeremy starts to go crazy too, really
yeah.
bringing up the intensity and emotion.
Yeah. Now you mentioned this was your first proper short. Like, I'm not discounting 515, and I want to see that. So we'll talk about that before we wrap up the show and stuff. But this is your
Sure.
first short, your first, I guess, professional one. You've had got a producer, you got an AD, stuff like that. What was the casting process like? You got to actually get to sit down and see people walk through and read your dialogue. They're going to be, in your film. What was that whole experience like for you?
It was incredible, and I'll start with Enter the Room, but I'll expand out a bit
Go
because
for it.
some people will think I'm a sicko, but casting is actually one of just my favorite things to do ever.
Mm.
I'll get more into that in a bit. So I'll start with Enter the Room, where this was again where meeting Lance was so important. He had had a decent amount of experience. He posted on two websites. He posted on Breakdown Express or Actors Access for Actors. That is still that and Backstage, I would say, are my two favorite casting websites. And he posted on Craigslist, which
Oh
kind of
wow.
interesting. Yeah, and we actually had better fortune with Breakdown Express. Peter and Rich were both through Breakdown Express. However, we did have three people come in from Craigslist, and they were pretty good and were in consideration. So Craigslist is not something I would have imagined posting on, but I will kind of use it as one of my later options now. But yeah, we didn't have like a huge casting process. It was a one night deal where I believe we had 14 actors come in, and then we had maybe four more send a tape. And yeah, as I'd mentioned, it was Rich and Peter were definitely the best fits. There was one other actor who seemed like he would have been a pretty strong Jeremy, but he didn't quite have the emotional range or intensity that Rich had. And Rich looked more like how I envisioned the character. But yeah, it was incredible. I mean, getting to and what was interesting too was that kind of going into my whole casting process, I believe for film it's more common to have the actors read sides. What's interesting is Lance comes from a theater background,
Mm.
so he had them read monologues, and he
Nice.
would just give a little paragraph of like, this is kind of what's going on in your character's mind, convey these traits in 60 to 90 seconds. And even though they didn't read the lines for the audition, it just was very clear to me that these two actors had the ability, they had the intensity and range, and they fit the characters. So that was enough. And yeah, since then I've really expanded on my casting. I definitely, when I get into something, I go a bit overboard. For my next film, In the Backseat, we auditioned 148 actors for five
Wow.
roles. For Bay for or 145 for Bay for Blood, we auditioned 168 for three roles, and for my feature film, if you include tapes, I believe we auditioned about 420 for
Wow.
six roles. So it's gotten bigger and bigger, and I've
Mm.
kind of, as I've expanded, I've started to use Facebook groups. Actually, arguably the most talented actor I ever worked with found my notice through a Facebook post. Um, Backstage is phenomenal. Casting Networks Inc. is good. There's so many different casting websites. This is where I do think the internet, especially social media, can be toxic at
Mhm.
times. But it's hard for me to just hate it as a whole because as a filmmaker, it's just made it so much easier to find people. That's where when I started with my films, especially because as you've seen, even though Enter the Room is pretty hyper stylized, it really works in my opinion because of the actors and the script.
Mhm.
As you saw, I did as much as I could with the coloring and the editing, but the setting, it all takes place in a cramped apartment. I didn't even have posters up at the time, and my
Oh, is
films,
this the apart? Are you in the apartment that's from the movie?
yeah, it's I've
I
lived here.
recognized. I was looking at like just behind you, the little alcove to like the fridge. I'm like, hang on, is that Brian's kitchen? Like,
Yeah, it definitely looks different. I've upgraded the couch, the chair, some of the posters in the background, but it is the same apartment. But
that's
yeah,
cool.
so yeah, no, I'm glad you noticed. But yeah, I was just saying with so casting is one of the things I focus on the most. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how it's evolved, and I was not that I'm not stressed. It still can be tough when you see 20 actors in a row, and maybe half of them are good, but none of them are the right fit. So
Mm.
it's my process has become longer and longer, where it's more turned into a month to a 2 month thing. But it's really awesome that just the power of the internet and how many actors, especially in the Chicago area, there are. Where while I get stressed casting, I don't necessarily have the worry of I won't find any actor who's right for the role. That hasn't been an issue. Whereas there are certain skilled equipment positions where I've had more trouble, particularly gaffer. I think that's a really tough position, and it's not a position many can do, and the amount of equipment they have and how expensive it is, I think that all adds up. So it's interesting how, yeah, I actors I was the most kind of worried I wouldn't be able to find any, but it's kind of again, it's I put a lot into it and need to see a lot of people, but sort of when I go into casting, I'm just excited. I know I'm going to
Mm.
see a billion actors, but it's fun watching the competition, and when I see the right actors really shine, it's definitely very cathartic for me.
Yeah, very cool. And do you kind of cast exclusively from Chicago, or is the idea that if anyone's the right fit, it doesn't really matter where they're from?
Yeah, so no, I ideally would like to cast people who live in or close to Chicago, just because if someone's having to fly out,
Yeah.
these are pretty low budget films. I wouldn't be opposed to helping with travel expenses. It's just that if I have two people who are really good and one person lives in Chicago and they can just drive to set every day, and the
Yeah.
other person lives in Atlanta, excuse me, and especially with the features. With the shorts, it was a little easier because those are only a few days. I think with the features, I would be more weary of that was, for example, I was fortunate in that for the corridor crossing, there's this one character. She's supposed to be this dark arts specialist. And this character, I actually probably had the most trouble casting of anyone. We had well over 100 actresses audition, and a lot of them were really good. But there really were only two who I thought this person fully embodies this role. The one person I cast did and I believe still does live in Chicago, so perfect. The other person lived in Atlanta. And this character, she's a big part of the film, but she's only in about 15 or 20 minutes of it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
she only needs to be on set for, I think she was on set for 3 days. So if not for this actress in Chicago, I would have considered trying to assist with getting this other actress from Atlanta out, because she was clearly the best fit. So with that, if someone lives really far from Chicago, I'll have them send in a tape. But if they live closer, I still prefer to see people in person, just because there are definitely things you miss watching someone on a tape, subtleties with facial expressions that
Mm.
when you see in person you can kind of fully capture. So
And I know, obviously the pandemic has impacted things quite a bit. I've got a friend who's an actor, and he was saying that he does a lot of his auditions over Zoom, or kind of like the equivalent now. Is that something that you've kind of gone into? I really like you talking about doing the face-to-face into auditions, but if they are further away, is it more a tape thing, or is it do you do the Zoom ones as well? Like, what do you find is most effective?
So I have not done Zoom. I just find tapes, just because as I met during the audition process, and I mean this in a good way. I don't have a life. It's basically
Mm.
so what I done for my feature film, and if I get this next one started, I start posting casting notices in early December, and we start auditioning in January. And I basically send a billion emails. After I'll spend a few days posting the casting notices, and my email inbox gets absolutely destroyed. But I'm not. It's not me being mad. It's like, yes, like literally just. I mean, for the corridor crossing, we had, I think, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 submissions. Like
Wow.
it was insane. Um, so maybe even over 2,000. It was crazy. So yeah, I'm sifting through all the submissions. I'm picking the people who, whether I think they're right for the lead, or even if I'm not sure about the lead, but maybe right for a smaller supporting role, I'm bringing all them in. I'm trying to watch a little footage on them, and then I just have this giant Excel sheet where I'm just scheduling all the actors and actresses to come in, and then I'll rent the theater space. Um, so that I'm just doing that all basically when I'm not working, showering, or eating or sleeping. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and then when January comes, it's twice a week. I usually do Wednesday night and Saturday afternoon, where we go to the theater and we see actors and actresses for the Wednesday nights, maybe for 4 hours, and the Saturdays maybe for 5 hours. And so the ones who can't come in, I have send me tapes, because I simply don't have time to do a bunch of Zoom. Because
Yeah,
with the
sure.
tape, it's just whenever I have free time. Like I don't remember how many send in tapes, maybe 100 of the 400 plus send in tapes. So then I would just, once I finally have some free time, I'll tell myself, okay, I'll sit down, I'll watch 20 tapes, I'll take notes, and I'll see, if any of these, I'll grade them, and then I'll see if any of them are callbacks. Whereas, yeah, I think with the Zoom, it could, I see the value of it, but just based on my schedule, I could see it being a little time consuming.
Sure.
Whereas, yeah, what's nice with the in person too is we're all in this one location, and all the actors are coming and waiting, and we move relatively quick. I mean,
Yep.
I'll talk to them for a minute, because I find it a little dehumanizing. I've talked to actors where they're like, they come in and the director treats you like you're a piece of meat and then tells you to go. Like, I'll take
Yeah.
1 to 2 minutes to actually have a conversation with them, but they're still pretty quick. It's a one to
Yeah.
two minute conversation. See what they how their personality is, what they'd be like to work with. Then I'll ask them what they're going to perform. Then they'll perform, and yeah, I mean, usually each one could be out in like 4 or 5 minutes, and then kind of
Wow.
just have the next one come in. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really lovely to hear that. My buddy I mentioned, he does a lot of the Zoom ones, and he was saying that um, casting agents or directors will literally just end the Zoom call early if they don't like them. Like they don't want. I was like, oh my goodness, like what a cutthroat. I knew it was a cutthroat industry, but geez, so it's really encouraging to hear you say, oh no, like, I'll talk to them a little bit. And even though you've only got a few minutes to be with them, you get to actually like get to know them and hear them. That's really quite cool. I like that.
Thanks. And I always at the end too, because what you said does disturb. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it disturbs me. At the end, we've definitely had it happen. It actually happened more for my feature film. I think because since COVID, actors are a little less used to going in person.
Mm,
We had some people who really fumbled their lines, and I personally, I don't dismiss someone if they do that because that can just come down to nerves.
yeah, for
I
sure.
even had one of the actors who ended up working on my feature film. He's still mostly crushed, but in the callback, because we do 2 rounds, he had some little points where he was a little inconsistent. I look more for, are they the right fit? Do they have the
Mm,
emotional range and intensity? So we've had some actors and actresses come in and they fumble their lines and they get really nervous. And I'm not going to kick them out. It's just like,
yeah,
we'll tell them to take a deep breath. We've had a few people where we'd have them wait outside, and then at the end, once all the other actors had come in, they come back in, and just because, yeah, I don't want someone to leave like feeling. I'm sure it's nerve wracking enough being an actor and actress, getting the courage to come in, and I just don't want to be rude and make it worse. So it's like
mhm,
there have absolutely been times where someone came in and they didn't do well, but usually when they're finished, I'll just say thank you. We'll let you know in the next few weeks if we decide to cast you or cast someone else, and then they just say thanks and
yeah.
are out on. So
That's very cool. It's very encouraging to hear that there's still people out there treating people like humans. That's good. Good to hear.
I
Um,
think with
go on.
oh
Sorry.
sorry
No, no, go.
I
I was
think
going to change the subject, so please go. Yeah.
oh yeah, no, sorry, just like real quick. I think more indie filmmakers are like
Mm,
that. I've the nightmare stories I've heard are unfortunately where it's something bigger budget, and it's part of the problem is it's a casting agent who does it all day every day.
yeah.
And they might not be as enthusiastic, and there might be a rule. You have to see 100 people today. Whereas we see a lot, but we're not seeing that many. We're still in our 15-minute blocks. We might see like four, maybe 5 people. So there's enough time spread out where like I'm okay if we're running a little late. I
Yeah.
don't want to. It's like all right if we run a like we rent the theater space we rent. In my experience, if we get out of there a little late, it's okay. I'd rather run a little late than treat all the actors like they're numbers. So
Yeah. You raise a good point, though. I guess there's also part of it is a point of efficiency. Like if that is your job all day, every day, you're like, look, I know
yeah,
what we're looking for. I know how to do this quickly. I don't have time for pleasantries. It's not nice, but I guess it is business. But
yeah.
maybe I won't be so hard on the casting directors. Um, we've talked or alluded to the finale of the short quite a bit, and I don't want to give anything away because obviously that is kind of everything we're building towards. But visually, it's got to be one of the most interesting things I've seen in a film in a long time. Where did the idea come from? Like it reminded me of, and I mentioned very early on, Gaspar Noé. He has a film called Lux Eterna, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with. I imagine you probably are, based on the ending. Where did the decision to do that with color and lighting and editing come from? Was it always part of the plan? Was it something that kind of popped up last minute? What was the drive there?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought him up because he is one of when people ask me my very favorite directors, he's not someone that comes up right away, but he's one of those dark horses. I actually haven't you can't see it, but I have an Enter the Void poster here
Very
next to
cool.
my above my bed. That was the first film I saw of his. Stylistically, he is absolutely one of my five, maybe three favorite directors. His bright, flashing lights, crazy colors, and just how bold his narratives go. He's somebody I've been a big fan of for a while, and yeah, I mean, it was. I would say the influence, it definitely started with films like Enter the Void and Irreversible.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, just his style in general, those very extreme, like very overly saturated colors. That was something that I was hoping it didn't catch on at first, but when I made this film, I had him specifically in mind.
mm.
Interestingly enough, in the beginning, and it was a pleasant surprise, and I can now see it. Enter the Room was receiving some David Lynch comparisons, a filmmaker who
I
I
can
absolutely
see that as well. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But then it happened a couple times. It happened at one festival I was at in Yonkers, where an actor who saw my film was he really liked it. He was in one of the other films, and he mentioned the director, and it started coming up more and more. And I'm extremely pleased that people have caught on, and I'm so happy you brought it up. Yeah, that was definitely where it started. And then I would just say, as for the colors, I the blue in the beginning, I'm going for this kind of melancholic, lonely feel of
Mm,
Brian sort of not trying to give away too much, but foreshadowing of like this man is lost. He is truly alone, even though his brother is there to see him for a few weeks. Um, and then the red to represent anger, and the green was more just color wise. Green, I believe, green, blue, and red go together, and
mm.
at the end, almost turning into this, is what's real, what's not? Is this a nightmare? Is this reality? It just felt appropriate to be flashing back and forth between the colors. But it's definitely a sequence that's somewhat polarizing. What I like about it, and what my dad told me when I started showing the film to people, is that there are absolutely some people who hate it, and of
Mm.
course, and when I do release the final film, I am going to have a bright flashing lights warning, because
Yeah.
the private screen doesn't have that. I've gotten a few complaints about that, which is understandable. But yeah, that sequence, generally, it's a people hate it or people love it. So I'm glad that it sounds like you really liked it. But it's definitely, of all my films, it's one of my favorite sequences for sure. But and I feel that it tonally matches where the film's going at the end. But I do understand why it's not for everyone. I'm sure it's been rejected from some festivals solely for that reason, and some people have not reacted too well because of it. But yeah.
It's very effective. Look, I had no idea. Like as like, obviously, I knew nothing about the film going in other than kind of what you told me about it. And as I said, I was blindsided because I'm like, this isn't a psychological thriller. This is a comedy. This is so funny. And then like there are little hints. Like there's a text message. There's an email. I'm going to keep it very spoiler free for people who haven't seen it yet. And then there's the sequence on the bed where the color shifts to red. And then at that point, I started piecing it all together. Never in my life did I imagine we were going to get a kaleidoscopic Gaspar Noé ending where it just was flashing, and I loved it. I think it's so memorable. It's such a great, almost like calling card for the film because even if people are seeing a slew of independent films and shorts and they forget what it's called, I mean, how could you? Like, it's so impactful to me. But even if you forget the movie, like, no one's going to forget that ending. Like, it's just so memorable and different to anything else out there. And even though I did liken it to Lux Eternal, like that's obviously I don't know a lot of people in my circles that have seen that film. Like that's a pretty out there kind of weird niche film. So I think it's such a genius move. And I get the critiques. I get people not enjoying it, the flashing light. But compared to something like Lux, where Gaspar Noé loves to do that, and then he also puts in music at a decibel range that's really unsettling. I think the fact that you didn't do that made it a much more pleasant experience. So no, I think I really like it. Really kind of stuck out to me as like what a great like. Yes, it serves the story, but even if you just put it in there as a gimmick, I'd be like, what a great gimmick. But it's not. It's so much more that it serves the story so well. I didn't know that that was going to happen, but now that I've seen the film as many times as I have, there's no other way I could imagine that film ending. It needs to have that somewhat polarizing, as you mentioned, kind of kaleidoscope effect. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was appropriate to make something stylistically as chaotic as possible to kind of represent where his mind was going. But yeah.
Excellent. You'll notice that so I don't really ask questions. I just like tell you how good the movie is the entire time, but I end it with a question mark, so you feel like you have to answer. Um, Harry, you've been a wonderful guest, mate. It's been so much fun getting to know you, learning your story, talking about the short. Before we get out of here, we'll definitely promote the short, and I want to talk about 515 and some of your other stuff coming up. We like to end the episode with a bit of a rapid fire question round. I didn't prepare for this. You cool to answer a few questions?
Sure.
This is all more about your movie watching habits. Let me pull it up because it's been a minute since I've asked them. Uh, so, Harry, I know you've been kind of in post production and started writing this next thing, so I know you're kind of hectic at the moment. But what was the last movie you watched?
So the last movie, this is great. I'm okay. The last movie that here's a two part answer, because sometimes I multitask, and maybe this is bad, and I know some film buffs will scoff at this. I sometimes multitask with stuff that I'm not. I mean, again, I watch everything. I watch the most random movies that I watch movies that no one's ever heard of that like only have a few ratings on IMDb and Letterbox.
Mm.
Um, so the last actual film I don't know if I would name, but let's say the last film I watched that stood out to me. I'm again apology because I'm watching. I'm usually watching one or two movies a day, and on weekends sometimes more. So I'm gonna go with. I'm trying to think of the most appropriate. Yeah, this is where I feel. Oh, okay. I like movies, which very. So I like movies, which I watched incredibly recently. Just the. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. I love the lead performance. I don't know if you're familiar with the film. Not a super well known film, American indie film called I Like Movies.
Oh, I literally thought you were just telling me that you liked movies. I didn't know it was called
Oh
that.
no,
I was like, oh, it's late in the show, but I'm glad. No,
yeah,
I
the
haven't heard of it, but I like
so
the
yeah,
sound of it.
yeah, this film called I Like Movies. It's basically, I mean, the title kind of explains it. It's about this high school kid. He's this um he's this intelligent, fast talking, but he's pretty arrogant.
Mm,
He's definitely insecure because he's a bit overweight and he's not popular. But he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. And he has this one friend, and he's very much the alpha in the friendship. And they get along watching movies. He's really passionate. I mean, there definitely were some sides I saw of him, but he takes it to a pretty far extreme where he was making me cringe. Anyway, so he wants to go to a really prestigious film school. I
I
believe
have
it's
heard of this
even
one. I've just
yeah.
IMDb'd it. I've seen I haven't seen it, but I have heard it. I'm so sorry. I
Oh no,
needed
it's
to
okay.
I needed to make sure I'd heard of this movie. Good.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was a movie I have watched very recently, and it's at least the last one I saw that stood out to me. But yeah, so he really is the driving force, which may be part of the reason I picked it is because we're talking about Brian being this
Mm,
Brian being kind of the driving force behind Enter the Room. Um, he's also while he's getting ready to graduate, he's simultaneously working at a video store,
mhm,
and he doesn't have a proper. This is the first real job he's had, and obviously NYU film school is really expensive, and he has this idea that he's going to make this insane amount of money being like a video store clerk. Well, and I think also thinking he's gonna oh yeah, I'm working at a video store that's like a film production job, and well, I think it'd be cool working at a video store, but he becomes quickly brought back to reality, and he meets
mm,
this one woman who's higher up, and she's been working there a while, and later learns she used to be an actress, and I won't spoil it, but she kind of burned out of the industry, and the she's another real good part of the film. They're kind of the driving force. But yeah, it's very dialogue focused, very character script. Really solid film. Maybe not the most unpredictable film I've seen, but I was really impressed by the kid, and it was a little like with Brian, where it was like,
mm,
okay, this kid's amusing. Oh, this kid is like kind of a jerk. Oh, this kid's kind of insufferable. To really point that I like the way he treats his friend and just how much he puts himself on a pedestal just because he has very good film taste, but he's a bit obnoxious about it. But then later they do a good job bringing it back, and you see some of the problems he's gone through, and he has panic attack issues. So it really his arc reminded me a bit of Brian's arc. I
mm.
would say this film does not go as dark as Enter the Room, but it's a really well made, solid indie film that I think is worth a watch solely for his performance, but is also well written, well directed, and I had a lot of fun watching it for sure. It definitely this doesn't sound like it'd be an issue with you for someone who does not like watching characters who can be a bit polarizing. It might be an unpleasant experience, but I think you would probably find it to be very amusing. I was laughing a lot, even when he was really grinding my gears, I found the film in a darker way to be pretty hilarious at times.
Oh, I have no problem with an unlikable character. Like, throw them at me. Like, it's always a fascinating watch, and that sounds like something that hits really close to home. I'm like, oh, I think I might have been insufferable when I worked in the video store. I'm probably going to see more of myself in this movie than I probably want to admit, but I'll check that out. That sounds awesome. That sounds like a really good old time at the movies. Um, all right. So next up, what's a movie that's been sitting on your watch list forever? We've all got something, you know. We even if you watch a movie a day like you and I do, there's always something we haven't got to. So what's your movie that you haven't watched yet?
All right, so for watch list, I'm trying to think of because I'm always behind on films. I always
Hmm.
basically January 1st of every year, I do this mass. I'll go through Letterbox, I'll go through Rotten Tomatoes, I'll kind of just Google what's popular, go through IMDb, and I will compile this insane list of movies. And while and I started doing it because I would watch these random indie films no one ever heard of, and I'd love them. More often than not, though, not that they're not good necessarily. I'm watching something and I'm not so into it. So
Hmm.
maybe I should be a little more exclusive because I'm always behind. So I'm currently going through 2023 films. I'm trying to think the movie that I want to watch. Sinners wouldn't be a good answer because it just came out. I think one that's been on my watch list for a while though, maybe not a super long time, but I'm such a big fan of Bong Joon Ho. Um,
Yes.
just everything he's done. Even when I watch some of his earlier work, like Memories of Murder, The Host, Mother, I
Mm.
love those, but then especially Snowpiercer is one of my favorite films ever.
Yes.
I
So good.
I really like Utopia, and obviously Parasite is a phenomenal film. So with his newest film, Mickey 17, that was one that even though it hasn't been out that long, I've known about it for a really long time.
Mm.
He's definitely one of my favorite directors, and I started doing this with Nolan, but have done it with tons of directors since. Is I heard about Mickey 17 a while ago, and it definitely intrigued me. And what's interesting though, the reviews are pretty good online. I have seen it seems to be getting somewhat polarizing posts by filmmakers in my film groups. Although I think maybe because he just made Parasite, people are being. It looks like he's going for something a little more quirky and comedic. So, based on everything I've seen, my guess is I will still like the film a lot. So that's probably the film that, as mentioned, hasn't been out forever, but it's one that I've had high on my watch list from way before it even came out, and that I'm looking. I was trying to see it in theaters. It was not in theaters very long. I still blame myself
Interesting. I
because I
think
should have been.
it's still playing here in Australia. We might get them a bit longer here, but 'cause I think I saw it opening weekend, and I think we might still have it. But it's got to hit streaming soon or physical. Physical is definitely my preferred option. But yeah, it should be out soon again.
Yeah, in the U.S., I mean, there may have been a few theaters, but main theaters, it felt like it was just a few weeks at
Yeah.
maximum. And I could be wrong. I thought or I think what you're saying. I think the streaming date got announced a
Okay.
decent while ago in the U.S. So, but anyway, so that's one that I've been looking forward to. I still could surely see over my handful of films coming up. There's some that I like more, but again, I'm such a fan of the director. I definitely got some Okja Snowpiercer vibes watching the trailer. So
Mm.
even if I only like it 75% as much, I think I'll still be very happy with the film.
I really enjoy. I agree with you. I've seen a lot of polarizing things, like kind of mixed feelings. I really enjoyed it. We actually just talked about it on the most recent episode of the show. No, sorry, two episodes ago now. I'm doing so many shows, I lose track of them. And you're like, it does have. Even I'm like, man, like we're following Parasite. It's gonna be a hard act to follow. But if you like Bong Joon Ho, I think you'll dig it. Like he clearly loves to tell story about class systems and the difference of the classes, and this is no exception. But it's a very very quirky take, and it's quite fun. So I think you'll probably have fun with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's what I figure is I don't need I love Parasite. I don't need a Parasite level masterpiece. I just want a good fun time with kind of Bong's his fun and kind of crazy style.
Mm. And there's definitely like I was talking about chewing the scenery before, which I think is overused as a critique. I think chewing the scenery is a positive. There's so much of it in this movie. Like you got Ruffalo, you got Tony Collette, you've got Robert Pattinson. Everyone's having a meal in this movie. It's great. So.
Nice. Yeah, the cast is awesome, so I'm looking forward to seeing all them.
Nice. This next one is maybe the most polarizing of my questions. Are you a movie crier, Harry?
No, I like the question. I am a I think the technical I'm not a make noise sob ugly crier, but I am absolutely a teary-eyed. So I didn't mention before, and this is something I actually like to talk about, is that my favorite part of film, I mean, there's so many things, but
Mm,
over the years I've thought about it. It depends what kind of a mood I'm in. As long as I'm not in a, sometimes I'm in a, oh, I just want my head to be spinning, like from
mm,
Hereditary or The Shining or Psycho, or, or something really, some really classic dark horror film. But a lot of the time, I just love catharsis. I love how
yes.
powerful that feeling is. And one of my favorite moments, I've talked about a lot of the darker, crazier films. One of my favorite films of all time is Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
And I suppose, though, for I wouldn't even say children, but for an animated film that, obviously a lot of children have seen, that film does, I would say, go darker than
Yeah.
your average film in that range. But obviously it's not as heavy as a lot of the films that we've been discussing. But yeah, the one of my favorite memories of college, all the fun I had, good times with friends and stuff. One of my favorite memories was my senior year of college. It was first semester. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I love how I remember that. It
Mm,
was I had finished class early that day. I think my classes were done at like 1. I went back to the house, and most of my roommates were out in class or, doing something else. And I just opened up my laptop because all these people were raving about Toy Story 3. And at
mm,
the time, I mentioned loving animated films. I went through a period when I was really young and all I did was watch, blockbusters, cartoons, animated films. And then I hit middle school, high school, and I did that awful thing of, I'm too cool for this stuff.
yep.
And I carried that all the way through college, which I'm not proud of. Even as I was watching movies in college, I kind of stayed away from Pixar. I stayed away from a lot of the animated or what I thought was children's stuff. But everybody wouldn't shut up about Toy Story 3. I
Mm,
remember there was a period where all my friends on Facebook, like people in my college or my high school, were just raving about it. And I'm just like, it can't be that good. And then I sat down, and I really liked the first two Toy Story films, but I thought this one kind of brought it to a different level.
yeah.
Um, just that feeling of abandonment, that opening
Mm,
scene, and then, seeing Lotso's backstory and how he got abandoned and how he turns into this villain, and the end was just done so perfectly,
yeah.
that I actually remembered. I rarely do this watching a movie, but when, you have the reveal. I not spoil? I know this film's been out a
It's like a
while, but
16-year-old movie. I think we can get away with it. It's okay.
okay,
Spoilers for
I'll
Toy Story 3 if you
yeah,
haven't seen it somehow.
I'll leave it. I'll leave it vague. The reveal when you see Andy, at the when it's like,
Yes.
oh, it's in the box. I remember exclaiming, "No!" But
Yeah.
anyway, so that was one of the first time where I remembered clearly, like, being teary eyed. And some people might be embarrassed, but I'm not. And that feeling was so strong that Toy Story 3 completely reignited my love for animated
Mm,
films, and I that whole summer, my parents had a bunch of old VHSs back when we still had a VHS player. I just watched every animated film I could get my hands on. I was
mm.
renting stuff out from the library, and then I got really into Pixar. So yeah, I mean, and that's just one of the many examples. I think a film that can push me to tears. There definitely have been a few where it was almost too much.
Yep.
Actually, this film didn't make me cry initially, but Grave of the Fireflies, if you haven't seen it, that's a
I
film.
I haven't, but I keep hearing it's one of those films that will destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of who, it probably makes it even more painful that I'm part Japanese. But even if you're not, it's still probably going to hit you the same. That's one. The interesting thing, I didn't even cry watching that. I just wanted to kind of crawl into my bed and cry. But
Mm,
that's the rare exception. With
yeah.
something like Toy Story 3, something that is cathartic or even sad, but where it pushes me to tears, I would say I am a crier. I probably am not. I'm more subtle about it. I'm not going to be like sticking my head out. I might be kind of like this. But it's supposed to be. Another film would be Up.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the first time I watched Up, it surprised me so much, the
Mm.
reveal with his wife, that it didn't even register. I remember thinking, they can't do that. This is like a movie. I mean, it's so much more. But at the time, I'd watch in college. I'm thinking this is a movie for children. And then the
Yeah.
second time I watched it, I completely lost it emotionally. So,
Yeah.
but those are just ones of the many examples. I can't remember specifically the last time I got teary eyed watching something, but it happens. It happens every now and then, and I
Mm.
find the feeling to be incredibly powerful. And that's with film in general. I love to be challenged intellectually, but I actually think I like being challenged emotionally the most. I love films and TV shows that make me feel that wide range of emotion for sure.
Agreed. Yeah, you mentioned the catharsis, and the movies is where I go to cry. It's like I don't really cry too much in real life. That's not because I'm tough. I just don't. I'm pretty lucky. I got a pretty good life. I'm pretty happy. So if I want to cry, I had this moment with my daughter recently. My daughter's 4.5, and we went and saw Dogman, which I don't know if you've seen Dogman. Dogman's a kids film, and there's a moment in it, and it gets pretty dark. Like for a kids film, it gets quite sad. And she turned to me and she goes, "Daddy," she goes, "This movie's making me really sad." And I was like, "Good. We're going to talk about this afterwards, and we're going to talk about our emotions." As a really like lovely learning opportunity. Like we kind of got talked about, it's important to connect with your emotions and embrace it. And it's good to feel sad. Like if the movie is telling
Oh,
you to feel sad, feel sad. Like this is really important. This is like a huge step for you. She's starting. I've been taking her to the movies for the last maybe 18 months or so on a pretty regular basis, trying to get her into my hobby a little bit, but also because she just really likes doing it. She just likes popcorn. If popcorn's involved, she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And over the last couple of watches, I'm starting to see that kind of cognitive development. Like we went and saw Wicked, and I was like, "There's no way this kid's going to understand this," and she got it. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like she gets it now. She's 4.5. She's now connecting with material. I can take her to see stuff. And Dogman was the first time she really connected with thing emotionally. I was like, "This is the blueprint. Okay, we've got it." So I 100% agree with the catharsis angle for sure.
nice. That's I haven't seen Dogman yet. But Wicked though got maybe not to the level of Toy Story 3 up, but Wicked got to me a little. There were a
Yeah,
few moments for sure. That
the
that was
dance that dance sequence when they start mirroring each other. Oh my god! Like my daughter's yelling at the screen, telling them all that be mean, and I'm in tears. Like,
I'm really glad you brought up that scene because I think that's probably common. That was the scene that got to me the most for sure. That was an effectively tough but cathartic watch.
and that's another example of like you've got a very like kind of loud character, and then very much a straight man kind of playing opposite, or in this position, like obviously the two women, and letting them both kind of just execute to the best of their ability and seeing that relationship evolve and so wonderful. um
Yeah,
this is not I always call this the not so rapid fire round. We are almost done. I won't hold you up for much longer.
no
um
worries.
I'm interested to hear your perspective on this being a director, and you talked about the casting process. Is there an actor or an actress that you will particularly follow anywhere? Is there just someone who you're like, if that person's in it, I'm there, I need to go check it out? Or does that sort of thing not really bother you?
There are a couple, and I love using these examples because so the first for actor, although if I'm correct, I believe he's not acting anymore. I know they sometimes they come back. One actor I've done this with is Daniel Day Lewis. He
Yes, yes.
he is, and what's interesting is, and this isn't even on the one hand, I think he's been in a lot of very good movies, and There Will Be Blood is one of my absolute
Mm,
favorite films of all time, and a film that I just like more and more every time I see it. And there are a few other films I've seen him in that I like quite a bit. What's interesting though, and it's not a question of I think he picks good films. He's been in a number of films though where it didn't look like my cup of tea, and I wasn't necessarily that interested in the subject material. But I thought, but it's Daniel Day Lewis, so I'm going to
mm,
watch. And what would happen was I would still end up enjoying the movie just for his performance. There would probably be some other qualities I would like. So he was someone where I was always like, yeah, this is a must. I have to watch it if he's in it. Um, for actress, kind of similar, where Kate Blanchett is someone who just
yes.
absolutely. Those are two people who just absolutely just I don't know if dissolve is the right word into their roles, and there definitely are some actors and actresses where they're really good, but I feel like not to name any specific names, but I feel like I'm kind of watching. It's like, oh yeah, this character is playing this. Even when it's a different role, you can kind of see it's still that actor. Those are two people where they just completely melt into their roles. And those are the two first people I can think of where I'll watch anything that they're in. There's some other actors and actresses where it's more they're in a lot of films I really like. Like Leonardo DiCaprio is an actor I've always really liked. He just generally tends to pick film. I mean, he works with Scorsese so much, and he's worked
Mm,
with Nolan, Tarantino, Spielberg, a handful of my and many people's favorite directors. So I'm generally just watching anything he's in. But I find what's more interesting with someone like a Daniel Day Lewis is with Leo. It's like I already would have watched these movies. I'm glad Leo's in it and he's crushing, but even if he wasn't and they had to have someone else who's only 90% as good, I would have still watched it. Whereas
mm.
it's like if Daniel Day Lewis was not in this film that not that many people heard of, or Kate Blanchett, like I probably never would have watched it in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Great answer. Great. And knowing that you were such a Lord of the Rings fan, like Kate Blanchett makes total sense because she's in that film for maybe 8 minutes and just every scene she's in like steals the show. Um,
Yeah.
um, we don't like to be negative. I certainly don't like to be negative, but we do like to ask, what's the worst film you've ever seen?
Okay, so two-parter. I'll part one. I think for actual feature film, I'll okay. Off the top of my head, there was a film I think called Deja Vu. I Spit on Your Grave. I think it has like
Ah, is that
below
the 30 years later sequel? Is that the one they did like
yes.
yeah.
It's the original. I think people actually. I think it's supposed to be controversial, but the original from I haven't seen it. From what I read, people actually some people like it. It's still somewhat polarizing. Yeah, the sequel. I was see. I can handle. And not that I would say this is the worst, but when there's like it's so bad it's good, like The Room by Tommy Wiseau. It's a
Yes.
movie. It's a movie that I definitely just from an objective standpoint, and the fact that everything he intended to do, it's almost like the opposite came out. And my initial reaction was, "Oh, this is up there," but the movie is just so charming. It's so much fun.
It's
It really,
inspiring. It's like this
yeah.
guy, he did it. And like he's still doing it. Like you might not like the movie or think it's poorly made, but you can't deny it has been successful. Like they even
Yeah,
made a
so
movie about him. Like
so solely because of that, it's impossible for me to even kind of put. Even though I think the quality is obviously very low, I had so much fun watching it with my friend. It was maybe the hardest I ever laughed watching a
yeah.
film. I laughed so hard that two-thirds through the film, I remembered I had a sore throat. I was
Yeah.
so that it's like for that alone, that film has a lot of value in its own way. So that was so my issue with something like this film I mentioned first was that it's not funny, it's not fun. It from what I remembered, the acting was mostly pretty rough and it just felt very tasteless and
Mm.
violent for the sake of being violent. And I'm not somebody who's there are lots of movies that are extremely violent or can even be a little offensive, but I see the value in them. I think they're done in good taste.
Well,
With
you
this,
mentioned Irreversible before. You know,
yeah,
Irreversible, very polarizing film. I remember that came out on DVD when I worked in the video store, and someone hired it because of the festival buzz, and they came back like 30 minutes later complaining about it, as if we had anything to do with the making of the movie. It's like it's a very
yeah,
polarizing film. It's violent. It's got what is it like the world record for the longest like
8 minutes.
uncut scene of that? Yeah, like we don't need to go into the detail, but it's well made. It's beautifully shot. Like the storytelling is interesting. The ending, I think, is more harrowing because you see it in reverse. Like there's so much to it. Like it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's an artistic quality to it. I haven't
Absolutely.
seen Deja Vu, I Spit on Your Grave. I've seen a few of the I Spit on Your Grave, especially when I was in my 20s. And I was like, oh, it's edgy. I'm going to watch like edgy films. Like now as a parent, I don't think I could ever watch any of them again. Um, but isn't it also like 2.5 hours long?
It's I think it's very long. It was definitely for professional feature films. It was the most unpleasant experience for me. And
Wow.
again, I don't like as a filmmaker, and I've had a few times where someone really ripped my film. I never want to rip someone too bad, so I don't want to like seem like I have venom towards the film. I just felt like it was all the intentions were wrong in the execution. Even with a lot of bad stuff I watch, I find something redeeming about it. And
Mm.
with that film, it was really hard for me to find anything. That would be for feature four, and I won't get into these specifics. I have, well, I've seen so many amazing indie shorts at these festivals and online, and I've actually become obsessed with short films.
Mm,
I've definitely seen some shorts where I don't even know if I would use the word worst, but you definitely see some filmmakers where it's like they just don't really grasp storytelling. And
mm,
it's like I've sat through a few 40-minute shorts where it actually felt like physical torture at a couple of festivals I've been to. I won't name names because at least Deja Vu, I Spit on Your Grave, like the filmmakers, they're known enough where like, of course they're not going to like it, but I wouldn't want to specifically mention, some kid who made some film that he or she loved and they didn't really know what they were doing and they're not used to the press. I'm not going to publicly name any. It
yeah.
hasn't been often, but I've seen a few at festivals where it was just like I remembered one. I brought my family to see it, and the film was like 40 minutes, and the films already were not the best. We'd already been sitting there like an hour and a half, and it was 40 minutes. I felt like I was sitting there for 4 hours, and I apologized to my sister and my parents after, and they were just like, "It's fine. It's not your fault."
Yeah.
So those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, the director of I Spit in Your Grave knows what his product is. He knows he's making a film that most people will probably not like. It's not meant I don't think those films are designed to be enjoyed. It's yeah.
Yeah. So
Um and then the last question, and it'll be interesting again coming from a filmmaker. What's one film in your mind they should never remake? We live in a world of reboots, requels, remakes, sequels. What's one you don't want them touching?
I'll give you one. I feel like there's so many. Like
Mm.
I could just like I could start listing out, and like you said, it's and I well, what's interesting now is it's not even a cash grab anymore. I feel like Disney's starting to learn with these Disney live action remakes. I feel like they're not making money, but I understood back in the day when it's like, all right, well, we're here for the bottom line and we don't care about the, creative artistic side of things, so we're going to remake something. But yeah, there's so many films. Anything that I think really works. I'm trying to think if there's a specific film that hasn't been remade that would upset me so much. I think if I think if Psycho, the original Hitchcock Psycho film was remade, well, no, it
They
had
did Gus Van Sant,
it
yeah,
did.
in the 90s.
I'm yeah, I'm trying to think of one that hasn't because, well, I guess technically I know there was a Lord of the Rings. Wasn't there an animated
Yeah, was
trilogy?
it Ralph Bakshi? I want to say it was him or no, it wouldn't have been Ralph Bakshi, but it was there was definitely a 70s version of The Hobbit and a 70s. They squeezed all three books into a 70-minute animated film. I don't know how they did it.
And that's crazy. So, like on the top of my head, I would say, even though there already's one made before, if Lord of the Rings was remade, although I mean I know they've kind of done spin-offs, but if they straight up just tried to do a remake of the trilogy, that would deeply upset me.
I
I did
agree. I agree, yeah.
Yeah, I did feel a little. I still enjoyed the Hobbit films, but I even got a slight feeling that when Peter Jackson made them, he was trying to relive Lord of the Rings a little. And I thought it worked at first, but I think if they maybe condensed it to one film, even if it was longer, it could have been better. But particularly at the end, I felt
Yeah.
that the last film really felt bloated.
Yeah,
But
there's a
yeah,
notable noticeable difference in quality. I rewatch Rings every year. Every year we put it on. We watch the extended cuts, my wife and I. Um, and I guess because it's part of our formative years. It sounds like you and I are very similar in age. Like those Rings films hold up so well, and it's because they use makeup, they use practical effects, like all this sort of stuff, and the CGI they did use was just to kind of enhance and add to it. Whereas The Hobbit, I enjoy them for what they are, and I find, especially the first one. I think the first one in particular is quite fun. The second one's got a few good moments, but I agree with you. But the third one, I was like, this did not need to be a trilogy. Like this could have been maybe two films. Like maybe if you want to tell like a really full round of the story, you could have done two films. But I felt like the third film was quite short and was almost like an appendix to the series itself. And there's a real difference. It's so funny, like knowing the story. Like Peter Jackson fought so hard to get Rings made into a trilogy. Like it took him so long to get them to approve it as three films. And with Hobbit, it was almost like the studio was like, "You need to make three films. You need to make a trilogy so we can make more money." Like that's kind of what it felt like in a way.
yeah, they saw the success of Lord of the Rings and thought, "Oh, you can repeat it," and then it,
Mm.
yeah, unfortunately.
Uh, Good answer. I don't think anyone's mentioned Lord of the Rings before. Our most common answer, everyone always says Back to the Future. So it was nice to hear something different from Back to the Future. Um,
That that's a good one, but I'm glad if everyone else like I'm thinking, oh, of course I should have thought. But yeah, again, I feel like there's so many that just shouldn't be touched. It's more for me. It's if something has potential and it falters at the end, that's when talk about a remake. But
mm.
usually it's always was so successful, so we should revisit this, and maybe it'll make a lot of money. And yeah,
The only exception I'll make, and I know that this is a polarizing opinion, I've said this to people, some love it, some hate it. The only exception I'll make is I'm okay with American remakes of international films. And here's why: it broadens the audience. Like, if I never saw the American version of Old Boy by Spike Lee, I might never have gone back and found um, Park Chan Wook, and never seen any of his films. So, like, there are certain films where, like, Let the Right One In, I think I saw Let Me In first, and then I was like, oh, there's an original. So I feel like that is an exception. I think if you're going to do a remake, an Americanized version of an international film, it's probably not going to be as good. It's probably going to, kind of soften the ending generally, especially with the horror stuff. But I feel like if you get one out of every 100 people then go back to the source material, it's almost worth it. So that's the only exception I'll make for remakes.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think for the average consumer isn't necessarily watching foreign films all the time, so that can be, even though you and I might be, that's a good way to pull some people. Because yeah, so I did see Let the Right One In before Let Me In, um, but I mean Let Me In it's well made enough. Even if
Mm,
it's more like 75 to 80% of Let the Right One In, it's good enough where then the audience could think, oh, well, you know, I should check out the original, which is supposed
mm,
to be so great. That's actually what happened with I watched the American version of The Ring, which I loved before I
yes.
saw the Japanese one, and I may have never. I mean, I probably would have, but if I was less obsessed with films and had just seen if not for the American one being remade, which I think is at least close to the Japanese one, I may have in that world not seen the Japanese one.
Yeah. Nice one. Harry, you've been a wonderful guest. I told you an hour to an hour and a half. It's actually been going almost 2 hours. So you've been so gracious with your time and patient and lovely. I want to send people to you. I want to send people to the films that you've made. You've mentioned 515 a few times. Is that readily available? Is it on YouTube? Where can people go and see your first film?
Yeah, so 515, fortunately, that one it's in a couple areas. It's on my website,
Mhm.
edgewaterfilmproductions.com.
Okay.
It, and even if you don't type in if you just Google Edgewater Film Productions, my site should show up first. It's under the portfolio tab. And
Excellent.
515, yeah, it's also on my Vimeo page. And if you just Google Vimeo Harry Waldman, my name should show up. So those are the two places that you can see 515.
I'll throw a link in the episode notes so that way people can jump into it that way.
Awesome.
And then Enter the Room is still on the festival circuit. When will people be able to see it? Do we have a kind of ETA when people can see it? Is there a way people can see it now? What's the best way for them to access Enter the Room?
Yeah, of course. So if you want to see it right now, feel free to email me. My email address is edgewaterfilmproductions@gmail.com. That's the quickest way. You can contact me through my website too. There's a contact button, I believe, at the bottom of each page on my website. Or if you just Google my name, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, I'm on Threads, Blue Sky, all that stuff. So if you email me for a private screener or message me through one of the social media channels, I want as many people to see it as possible. I'm happy to send over a private link. As for publicly, I don't have a set date. It's the festival run is starting to die down. I have a few more festivals. I did recently learn, for anyone who knows the festival circuit, that Enter the Room will be screening at Gen Con in Indianapolis this August, which I'm super excited about. I went last summer for another short. They're an awesome genre festival, especially their sci-fi films. So I got a few more screenings coming up throughout the summer, fall. The festival run should basically be done in 2025. I don't have a set, or excuse me, in 2026. I don't have a set date, but I'm hoping at some point throughout the year to have them up on my Vimeo and YouTube pages. So, as mentioned, if you Google Harry Waldman YouTube or Harry Waldman Vimeo, those will show up. Feel free to like the page, subscribe to the channel, and they will eventually end up on there publicly.
Awesome. I'll get a bunch of links This episode won't go for a couple of weeks. I've got time, so I'll definitely get a bunch of links. And I'll throw them in there as well to make it easy for people. And you've already promoted your socials. You're such a professional. You've already taken care of all of that. Um, Before we get out of here, Harry, is there anything else you want to tell people? You got the feature coming up still a little while in the future from the sounds of it, but anything else people need to know about before we close this one out for you?
I think we covered it all. Just maybe sounds obvious. Just I when I was younger, I spent too much time doing things I felt like I had to do. Obviously, you need to pay the bills and have want a roof over your head. But after that, I just think that I'm a much happier person because I've stopped worrying about what others think as much
Mm.
and just focused a little more on myself and my hobbies and passions. And I feel like I am a richer person for it.
Awesome. Great advice. What a great way to end the show on that. You've been an amazing guest. You're welcome back anytime, Harry. Hopefully, when the feature comes out, we can bring you on. We can talk about that one as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. We're going to check out 515, and I'll hit you up about that once I've seen it. Um, Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hopefully, you enjoyed our chat with Harry. Wonderful guest. It's so fascinating. What a great story. We'll be back next week and with another wonderful guest. But until then, thanks for listening. I'm James. And as I say every week on the show, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.